8th generation warfare. Are you ready?
Welcome to the deep dive. So this is a bit of an unusual one. The source material we're working with today isn't just research. The authors present it as a critical wake-up call.
They do. They even frame their investigation as an agoge mission.
A mission for what exactly?
To bring the aletheia, which is, the unvarnished truth for the record.
And what is that truth? What's the core assertion here?
It's deeply serious. The sources argue that the general public, who they call the oikos, the citizenry, is the direct target.
The target of what?
A hostile 8th generation warfare campaign, or 8GW.
Okay, 8GW. We have to unpack that immediately. Because when you and I hear warfare, we think kinetic. We think bombs and armies.
Right, but this is entirely different. It's not about force. The sources define it as a war of administration. It's about hostile systems management and systemic co-option. The end goal, what they call the telos. It's simple.
Which is?
To gain administrative control over 4 key domains: finance, media, governance, and technology.
So not conquering territory, but controlling the very systems that run our society.
Exactly. And their specific mission, the task given to them, was to map the Hydra.
And today, we're going to focus on that, on exposing the, quote, faces who hold up the corporate shields.
And we'll be identifying what the sources are calling the central integrator that connects all 4 of those sectors.
So let's start mapping this Hydra. The sources begin with what they call Layer 1 targets.
Right, the corporate shields. These are the massive organizations that, basically define the 8GW battle space.
And we see some huge names right away.
We do. In tech, it's Microsoft and Alphabet, or Google. In finance, it's the giants BlackRock, JP Morgan Chase.
But the investigation seems to pivot pretty quickly from those household names.
It does, because it starts tracking the money that's flowing in the shadows.
And that's where the donor-advised funds, the DIFs, come in. The sources call them a financial black hole.
And for good reason. It's the mechanism. The 3 big ones named are Fidelity Charitable, Schwab Charitable, and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, SVCF.
So how does that work? How does it become a black hole?
Well, when a donor gives money to a DAI, they get their tax benefit immediately. But the DIF is an intermediary. It holds the money and then distributes it later on to an NGO.
So it makes the funding non-attributable.
Precisely. It obscures the direct line between, say, a tech billionaire and the political group that ultimately gets the cash.
So let me get this straight. Tech wealth goes in, it gets washed through these DS, and then it funds an operation without any public trail back to the original source.
That's the model. And the documents give very specific examples.
Like what?
The SVCF, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, granted $1.7 million to the Immigrant Legal Resource Center.
Wow.
And another $500,000, just over, to the National Immigration Law Center. This is anonymous tech money directly building the legal infrastructure for mass migration.
And then there's the technological backbone, which the sources label the cyber and foreign intel nexus.
Yes, and that list is very specific. Palo Alto Networks, Checkpoint Software, Team 8, and a company called Wiz.
What's the common link there?
They all have an explicit, documented linkage to Israel's elite intelligence unit, Unit 8200.
And why is that so critical, according to the sources?
Because it establishes that the technical expertise driving this whole system is, well, it's deeply integrated with foreign intelligence capabilities from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's shift focus. The sources pinpoint one entity as the central HEW command and control nexus.
Microsoft's board of directors.
And the reason is what they call interlocking directorates.
Yes. The density of individuals holding top positions across multiple key sectors, all on that one board, it's extraordinary. This is where the abstract idea of control becomes very, very concrete.
So let's look at the first one, the tech bank Interlock. That's Charles W. Scharf.
Right, Scharf. He's an independent director on the Microsoft board. But at the very same time, he is the chairman and CEO of Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo. So that's a direct, a governance level fusion.
A complete fusion between a dominant AI and cloud tech firm and a too-big-to-fail U.S. bank. That right there fulfills the finance objective of the HEW strategy.
And the sources say he's also connected to global policy bodies.
Deeply. The World Economic Forum, the Business Council, it all synthesizes.
It's like having one person who can write the blueprint to the entire digital financial system.
Yeah.
From both the tech side and the bank side.
That's the implication, yes. Then you have the next Interlock, tech advocacy and debanking.
And this is Reid Hoffman, also a director at Microsoft.
Yes, and his profile, in this context, it's very telling.
How so?
The documents show his dual role. He was founding board member and an executive vice president of PayPal.
Which the sources specifically label a debanking tool.
A tool capable of controlling who can and can't participate in commerce. But at the same time, he co-founded the immigration lobbying group FWD.US.
Which claims to be bipartisan.
Right. So on one person's resume, on one board seat at Microsoft, you have a direct link to administrative financial control and the powerful immigration lobby.
And there's a third one, the Tech Global Policy Interlock, Penny Pritzker.
Pritzker, her background is pure governance. She's on the Microsoft board, chairs their policy committee.
And she was the 38th U.S. Secretary of Commerce.
Under the Obama administration, yes. But maybe more importantly for this global objective, she's a confirmed board member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
The CFR.
And the advisory board chairman of the Aspen Institute. These are, according to the sources, high-level global policy formulators.
What's really fascinating here is what the sources call the golf course nexus, the informal links.
Yeah, that's the layer underneath. It shows how the formal power is reinforced. Both Scharf and Pritzker are affiliated with the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
A cultural citadel, as they call it.
It just demonstrates that these formal structures are built on top of a shared cultural and policy world. They aren't just colleagues. They move in the same circles. They support the same institutions.
So let's move from finance and policy to the technology itself. Specifically, how that control is integrated with foreign intelligence.
This brings us right back to Unit 8200.
Israel's elite intelligence unit.
The sources repeatedly identify it not just as a military unit, but as a de facto talent incubator, a feeder program for the global tech industry.
So there's a documented, continuous pipeline of intelligence expertise moving directly into these private, hyperscale tech companies.
It's a pattern, a serial process of absorption. The documents show Microsoft acquired a company called Adelum, which was founded by 8,200 veterans.
And the Google integration is even deeper.
Much deeper. We're talking about the planned acquisition of Wiz.
A cloud security firm founded entirely by 8,200 alumni.
Yes. And analysis of that deal, cited in the sources, described it as potentially the largest transfer of Israeli intelligence operatives into big tech in history.
So you have a huge chunk of foreign intelligence capability being folded directly into the operational core of a dominant cloud provider.
Which is critical for HEW. You need that level of advanced technological control for systems management.
And how does this network then connect to the on-the-ground management of the migration crisis?
The sources draw a direct line. Palo Alto Networks, founded by an 8,200 alumnus, is a corporate supporter of the NGO HIAS.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Google's own nonprofit arm, Google.org, gave $1 million in grants to launch something called Justicia Lab AI.
And what does that do?
It explicitly uses technology to accelerate access to justice for immigrants. So the intelligence-linked capital and the technology are actively building out and supporting the migration legal infrastructure.
Which brings us to the actual policy outcomes.
Yeah.
The systemic co-option in action.
And the best example is back to Charles Scharf at Wells Fargo, his dual policy there.
What was that policy?
It's a fascinating strategy. On one hand, Wells Fargo implemented an inclusionary policy. They started accepting, quote, a range of alternative identification for account openings, including several consular cards.
So making it easier to open a bank account if you have an ID that might otherwise be considered unreliable.
Exactly, to capture the unbanked immigrant market.
But why would a major bank take on that kind of compliance risk?
That's the pivot. That's the genius of it from a systems perspective. The risk of those unreliable analog IDs is immediately offset by the bank's aggressive push for biometric authentication.
iPrint ID, Face ID, all of that.
All of it. Scharf's strategy, as the analysis shows, is that digital ID is the technical solution to the compliance problem. You can accept an unreliable physical ID because you are immediately replacing it with a trackable, verifiable, auditable digital identity.
That is the very definition of systemic co-option.
It is.
You use the crisis, the border, the unbanked status, as the justification to roll out a controlled, trackable digital identity system.
It totally reframes the problem. Border management stops being a sovereign barrier issue and becomes a data management and compliance optimization problem.
Okay, before we wrap up, we have to touch on a really important finding, a moment where the investigators' own theory was busted by their own research.
This was a crucial correction, a really important one.
What was it?
early on, the belief was that a single person was the ultimate link, a man named Leon Rodriguez. He's the former director of USCIS and currently on the board of HIAS.
The NGO.
Right. And the theory was that he was also on the Microsoft board, creating this perfect singular connection, the one man linking it all.
But that wasn't true.
It was not. The sources definitively clarified that the person on the Microsoft board is a different man. Carlos A. Rodriguez, the CEO of ADP.
Not Leon Rodriguez.
A different Rodriguez entirely. And this resolves what the researchers called the contradiction.
And what's the conclusion they draw from that?
That the coordination is far more sophisticated than just one person. The hand coordinating this is not an individual. It is, quote, the system. The tech side, which is Microsoft and Carlos, and the NGO side, HIS and Leon, are separate leaders.
But they're all executing the exact same gauche.
The same mission, the mission of administrative control.
So to summarize here, what this map of the Hydra really shows is a continuous self-justifying pipeline.
It is. Intelligence-linked capital funds the network. Tech executives are fused with finance and policy boards. And the ultimate strategic goal, the telos, is... it's profound.
It's the shift from a physical border to a digital one.
A managed, controlled digital border. And the mass migration crisis, which this very network accelerates and manages, becomes the perfect justification for it. The erased physical border is replaced by a new one, a digital one.
Managed by this exact public-private partnership we've just outlined.
And this isn't theoretical. This digital border system is already being built. The sources point to the UNHCR's PRIME system and the US-backed BeatMap program.
And what do those do?
They're creating global, interoperable digital IDs for migrants. The purpose of this new system isn't to stop movement. It's to transform the border from a sovereign barrier into a logistical bottleneck, a resource to be managed and optimized by the very system we've just mapped.
So we've mapped the Hydra, the tech bank, tech lobby, tech policy, and tech intelligence interlocks. And the end game is absolute administrative control, enabled by a digital border. Okay, let's unpack this and what we explore next. Welcome back to the deep dive. In our last segments, we were mapping out the strategy, the concepts, but this time we're finding the actual spine.
We're looking for the corporate and financial body of what the sources are calling the system of systems.
So we're moving from the theory on the whiteboard to the actual physical map.
Exactly. Today is about mapping the structure. The mission here is to name the 4 key components. You have the central integrators, that's the tech, the foreign intel nexus, the talent,
the financial conduits for the money, and then the NGOs, which are the operational arms.
Right. And you have to understand, this isn't just a list of sponsors. The sources describe this as a deep organizational and governance fusion.
So this is where we really see who is pulling the levers, the tech, the money, the policy, and why the system is described as being so incredibly resilient.
It's the map of the operational Hydra, really.
Okay, let's unpack that. Section 1, the central integrators. These are the big tech companies, right? The foundation, the sources call them gravity wells, where power is fused. Where do we begin?
You have to start with Microsoft. It's identified in the sources as the foundational host.
And its role is... it's really something else. It's this profound corporate duality.
It is. On one side, you have its Azure government cloud platform. The company profits directly from huge contracts with, say, DHS and ICE. It's providing the core infrastructure for federal immigration enforcement.
And here's the kicker. At the exact same time, that same Azure platform is hosting things like the Oregon Measure 114 gun registry.
So it's providing the digital backbone for both Vector 1, which the sources call the invasion,
the migration flow,
and Vector 2, the disarmament or constraint agenda. It's astonishing.
I mean, how does one company do that? Profit from federal enforcement while also enabling state policy that seems to work directly against it.
Because it controls the indispensable infrastructure. When you are the foundation, you can serve 2 masters, even if they're politically opposed.
That makes sense. Okay, next up, Google, or Alphabet. The sources call it the AI weaponizer.
Yes, and this is so much bigger than just search algorithms. The sources point to a $1 million grant from Google.org to launch something called Justicia Lab AI.
And its purpose is explicit, right?
Oh, completely. It's designed to accelerate legal support and asylum claims for immigrants. It's essentially taking this very complex, very human process and treating it like a logistical problem to be optimized with AI.
So it's about scaling up the legal challenges to enforcement.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the next critical point here, Google's planned acquisition of Wiz, the cybersecurity firm.
I remember this. The sources made a huge claim about it.
A massive claim. They described it as potentially the largest transfer of Israeli intelligence operatives into big tech in history. We'll get to that talent pipeline in a moment.
Okay, so Microsoft is the host, Google is the weaponizer. What about Amazon?
Amazon Web Services, or AWS, is the classified cloud.
Break that down for us. This isn't just, server space for websites.
No, absolutely not. We're talking about AWS GovCloud, AWS Secret Region, and even AWS Top Secret Cloud. These are completely air-gapped, highly secure platforms built for one reason.
U.S. government top secret workloads.
Precisely. Amazon is basically a digital SCIF, a sensitive, compartmented information facility. If this system needs to operate secretly and at scale, it needs that foundation.
And the last integrator is Adobe, which is called the Narrative Controller. That seems a little different from the others. Why Adobe?
Because it controls the tools of information. Think about it. Adobe Sign is critical for digital identity and authorization. Legal processes, policy, it all runs on that.
And then you have Photoshop and Premiere.
The tools of media creation. It's about controlling the narrative, the mimetic warfare needed to drive political consensus. The whole thing runs on digital identity and digital narrative.
And we start to see the interlocks here. The sources note Spencer Newman. He was the CFO of Activision Blizzard, which Microsoft bought. He sits on Adobe's board.
A direct governance link between the integrators. And that brings us perfectly to our next component, the foreign intel nexus.
The nexus. So we're shifting from the platforms to the people who run them, the specialized talent.
Exactly. A system this complex needs, hyper-specialized talent and doctrine. And the sources identify one primary talent incubator, Unit 8200.
The Elite Signals Intelligence Unit of the Israeli Intelligence Corps. SIGINT, which for anyone listening is the core of modern electronic surveillance and cyber warfare.
So this isn't just hiring tech grads.
Not at all. The training in Unit 8200 is described as an institutionalized feeder program for the global tech industry, especially Silicon Valley. You're sourcing people with doctrine and real experience in large-scale strategic operations.
And you can see this pipeline pretty clearly when you just look at the companies these veterans founded.
It's undeniable. You have Palo Alto Networks, founded by an 8200 grad, a giant in security. And it's a documented corporate supporter of HIS, one of the NGOs we'll talk about. Then you have Checkpoint Software, also co-founded by an 8200 grad, and the VC firm Teammate.
And Teammate is a fascinating case. It was co-founded by Nadav Zafrir, who was the former commander of Unit 8200. His whole business model is built on leveraging this incredible alumni network.
So let's tie this back to the integrators. Wiz, the company Google is planning to buy.
Founded entirely by a team of 8,200 veterans, Asaf Rappaport, Yinon Kostica, the whole team. This isn't a one-off hire, it's a strategic acquisition of talent and, more importantly, of doctrine.
So the strategic consequence here is what?
It's a direct institutionalized transfer of methodology from a foreign military intelligence unit right into the core digital infrastructure of American big tech. It's the human capital needed to manage this kind of systemic control.
Okay, so we have the platforms of the talent.
Yeah.
Let's move to governance. Section 3. The interlocking directorates. The sources use the Microsoft board as the prime example. They call it the central command and control nexus.
Right, because this is where it all converges. This is where policy agendas meet the technology that can scale them.
Let's start with what the sources call the Tech Bank Interlock, Charles W. Scharf.
Scharf is an independent director on Microsoft's board. At the same time, he is the chairman and CEO of Wells Fargo.
That's not just a big name on a board, that's a direct link.
It's a direct governance link between the dominant AI and cloud company and one of the biggest banks in the country. And the sources say this is where the capability for systemic control, whether it's AI-driven policy or debanking, is synthesized. You're linking the digital platform directly to the financial levers.
And there are informal links too. Scharf and another director, Penny Pritzker, are both involved with places like the Kennedy Center. It shows a connection between tech, finance, and cultural power.
And Penny Pritzker is the key to the policy culture nexus. She's on the Microsoft board, of course. She chairs their committee on environmental, social, and public policy.
Her policy background is just staggering.
It really is. She's the 38th former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. She's a board member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and she's tied to the Aspen Institute. She connects the Microsoft board directly to the highest levels of global policy discussion.
And finally, there's Reid Hoffman, The sources connect him to the debanking and lobby Interlock.
That's right. Hoffman has these two critical past roles. First, he was a founding board member and executive VP of PayPal.
So the infrastructure of digital payments.
Exactly. And second, he co-founded FWD.us,
The pro-immigration lobbying group.
So when you look at the Microsoft board, this command and control nexus, you see it's structurally connected to everything. Major banking, global policy, digital payment control, and the main lobbying groups pushing the migration agenda.
It's a complete loop of governance.
It is the highest level of coordination described in the system's body.
Which brings us to our last section, the financial and operational arms. Let's start with the money. The financial conduits, or as the sources call them, the anonymity engines.
The central mechanism here are DAF, donor-advised funds. The big ones are the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Fidelity Charitable, and Schwab Charitable.
And these are described as a financial black hole. Can you explain how that works for the listener? How does a DF create anonymity?
It's basically the perfect insulation. A donor gives a large sum to, say, SVCF.
Yeah.
They get an immediate tax break. That money is now legally the DAF.
So when the money goes out to an NGO,
the check comes from SVCF, not the original donor. It completely obscures their identity. It's anonymized funding at an industrial scale.
And that's not the only tool. There's also the 1630 fund.
Right, a major 501c4 dark money conduit. This was the fund used to funnel anonymous donations directly to the Measure 114 campaign in Oregon. And of course, you see the big financial giants, BlackRock, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, all listed as key conduits.
Tying back to the Microsoft board again.
It always ties back. And this anonymous funding flows directly to the NGO network, which are the operational arms executing the system's two main vectors.
Vector 1 is what the sources call the invasion, the controlled migration pipeline. And the key players there are HIE Race and Catholic Charities. What do they do on the ground?
They are the legal infrastructure for the flow. They provide services like removal defense, which is the legal strategy to block or delay deportation.
And this is provided to whom?
According to the sources, to people who are not in legal immigration status and even individuals with criminal histories, especially in sanctuary states like Oregon. They exist to slow or stop federal enforcement.
And Vector 2 is disarmament, the constraint agenda. The operational arms there are Everytown for Gun Safety and Giffords Law Center.
They are the political architects.
Architects mean what?
Meaning they create and then push out the model legislation, the policy blueprints. This is what forms the architecture of Constraint. And that architecture then relies on the cloud infrastructure provided by the central integrators we started with. The whole system feeds itself.
So when you put it all together, what have we actually mapped today?
You've mapped a hydra, a single strategic body where intelligence, tech, finance, and nonprofits are all fused together. It's interlocked at the highest levels of corporate governance. It's built for redundancy and coordination.
And the goal, according to the sources, isn't just chaos at the border.
No, the stated goal is not erasure. It's replacement. It's about replacing the porous physical border with a new, highly controlled digital border of biometric identity management.
Things like the UNHCR's Prime system or Bitmap. How does that replace a physical border?
Well, if you can biometrically enroll and track everyone globally, a line on a map becomes secondary. You achieve total control over their digital identity, their financial access, their permission to move.
The digital border ensures that even if you let people in, you never, ever lose control.
And that digital control system is justified and scaled by the very migration crisis that this entire network is accelerating.
So the sources confirm this isn't about one bad act or one hand, it's an entire system of systems.
It is a complete structure.
So now that you see the map of that structure, here's the question we want to leave you with. How does a system like this react when its own complexity, its internal wiring and its operational arms, is fully exposed? Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we get to the final synthesis. We've gathered all the intel, we've cataloged the names, and now our mission is to fuse it all into one cohesive map of this modern power structure.
It's time. We're moving past just collecting the individual pieces of intelligence.
Right. We're connecting the three pillars we've been talking about: foreign intelligence and technology, global finance, and then the on-the-ground operations and policy.
Exactly. The goal here is to expose the systemic connections, the governance links, and really the specific faces that knit this whole battle space together. It's about the interlocking directorates that define the system.
So no more theory. We're talking verifiable corporate boards, policy groups, actual names. To really get this, we have to start at the source of its technical power. Where does this whole doctrine come from?
Well, the foundation, as our sources show, it really begins in Israel with Unit 8200.
The elite intelligence unit, kind of like the NSA here in the States.
Yeah, that's the one. But what's really fascinating is it's a secondary function. It acts as this powerful de facto talent incubator. It's a systematic feeder program for the global tech industry.
Especially cybersecurity.
Especially cybersecurity. And we need to unpack that talent pipeline because it is not subtle at all. These alumni, they're trained in military intelligence, cyber ops. They're not just getting entry-level jobs.
No, they're founding global behemoths.
Precisely. Look at the data. You have Palo Alto Networks, PanW, founded by Nir Zook. You've got Checkpoint Software, co-founded by Gil Schwed. And then there's Team 8.
The venture capital firm.
Right, focused on cybersecurity and co-founded by Nadav Zafrir. And this is the key detail. Zafrir is the former commander of Unit 8200.
So it's a direct institutionalized transfer of military intelligence operatives right into the corporate tech structure.
It is. And that pipeline is now integrating directly with big tech right here in the U.S.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Our source analysis flags the planned March 2025 acquisition of Wiz by Google. Now, Wiz is a cybersecurity unicorn, and it was founded entirely by 8,200 veterans. Every single one. And the analysis we saw described this event as, and I'm quoting here, the largest transfer of Israeli intelligence operatives into big tech in history.
Wow. That's more than a business deal. It's a strategic entanglement.
It is. Between a primary global data corporation, Google, and personnel trained specifically in cyber espionage.
Okay, so we have the source of the tech power. The next step, and this is what you need to follow, is tracing the money. How does this massive tech wealth get turned into funding for actual operations on the ground?
We follow the trail. It goes from the corporate and philanthropic arms straight to the NGOs. Palo Alto Networks, for instance, that same firm we just mentioned.
Founded by the 8,200 alum.
That's the one. It is a documented corporate supporter of HIS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. A direct connection.
And it's not just one company, is it?
Not at all. You have Microsoft-linked wealth through the Ballmer Group, which gave a massive $3 million grant to Catholic charities. And Google, through Google.org, provided $1 million in funding for something called Justicial Lab AI.
And what was the mandate for that funding?
Explicitly to accelerate access to justice for immigrants.
So the funding is the operational fuel. If we trace this pipeline physically, what does the operation look like in the field?
So in these high-risk transit zones, like the Darien Gap, the funding supports NGOs, HIAS, the Jesuit Refugee Service, JRS. They provide aid, yes, but also crucial legal rights training, logistical support.
And the sources say JRS partners openly state they help migrants.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Save some money so that they can continue their journey.
Yes, so it feels less like just a humanitarian response and more like a carefully managed logistics hub.
Which aligns with official policy.
It aligns perfectly with the U.S.-backed policy of controlled flow. That policy is explicitly designed to, and this is a quote, expand the capacity and speed of forward movement through the Darien Gap.
So the goal is optimization. It's acceleration, not stopping the flow.
Exactly. Using the NGOs as the key logistical nodes.
And when that flow reaches the U.S., where does this network anchor?
The same networks. HISS, Catholic Charities, and groups like SR. They provide what they call removal defense in sanctuary jurisdictions like Oregon.
And here's the detail from the source material that really stands out.
This is it. SOAR's own public list of populations served explicitly includes, quote, individuals with criminal histories and individuals who are not in legal immigration status.
It's a complete pipeline, financially insulated, technologically optimized from start to finish.
Precisely. Which brings us to the governance hub that synthesizes all of it.
The Central Command Nexus. And our analysis points straight to the Microsoft Board of Directors. You're saying this is the hub where tech, finance, and policy all meet.
Yes, but first we need to clear up a small detail that came up, the Rodriguez contradiction. We confirmed Leon Rodriguez, former USCIS director and on the HIS board, is not on the Microsoft board. Carlos A. Rodriguez, the CEO of ADP, is on the board, though he's stepping down next year.
Why was it so important to resolve that specific name?
Because it proves a key point. The link isn't dependent on one single person. It's structural. It's built into the governance template. The system's mandate continues even if individuals rotate out.
The structure is the key.
Let's look at that structure now. Starting with the Tech Bank Bridge. Primary individual one, Charles W. Scharf.
Tell us about him.
Scharf is a formal interlock. He's an independent director on the Microsoft board on their governance and nominating committee. At the same time, he's the chairman and CEO of Wells Fargo.
So one of the biggest banks in the world inside the governance of the central tech integrator. But, isn't that just standard corporate practice, having bank CEOs on boards?
It becomes a policy lever when that bank actively advances the agenda. Wells Fargo, under Scharf, accepts, quote, a range of alternative identification for account openings, including several consular cards. This isn't just good business. It's a business-driven policy of inclusion, using the bank's massive infrastructure to rapidly integrate these populations into the formal banking system.
Giving a system visibility and control. Powerful. Okay, Interlock 2. Reid Hoffman, the debanking and lobbying bridge.
Hoffman is crucial. He's a Microsoft board director. His second interlock is financial. He was a founding board member of PayPal.
PayPal, which has been associated with, let's call them controversial debanking actions.
Giving him a huge stake in the infrastructure of financial censorship. And then there's his third vector.
Policy influence.
Correct. He co-founded the pro-immigration lobbying group FWD.US. So he literally bridges the power to financially exclude opponents with the power to lobby for policies that accelerate migration.
It's the pincer movement. Next, Interlock 3. This one connects Microsoft to the highest levels of global policy. Penny Pritzker.
Pritzker is a formidable nexus. She's a Microsoft board director and, critically, the former 38th U.S. Secretary of Commerce.
Giving her direct influence over global economic policy and her other affiliations. They confirm her status within that policy citadel.
Absolutely. She's a current board member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, and she chairs the advisory board of the Aspen Institute.
For our listener, these aren't just think tanks.
No, they are where the elite establish global consensus. They normalize policy objectives before they ever get to a legislature. They set the tone.
And we found that informal interlock, too. Scharf from Wells Fargo and Pritzker, both on the Microsoft board, they interlock again at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
The synthesis confirms this network controls not just tech and finance, but the crucial nodes of culture and elite consensus. It's a whole-of-system approach.
Speaking of which, our analysis found a new synthesis point, one connecting Microsoft to another tech giant that controls the digital narrative itself.
Adobe.
This was a key late-stage finding. The Adobe board is connected to Microsoft through Spencer Newman. He's on Adobe's board now, but his last job, CFO of Activision Blizzard.
Which is a confirmed major Microsoft subsidiary. Right.
So why does linking Microsoft's governance to Adobe's matter so much in this context?
It matters because of what Adobe controls. It controls digital identity through things like Adobe Sign. But more critically, it controls the digital narrative through its software. Photoshop, Premiere.
The tools used for what some sources call digital subversion.
Precisely. The link ensures alignment between the central integrators that control the data, the cloud, and the tools used to create synthetic stories and cultural messaging.
Okay, so if we pull back, the entire network has this clear dual focus. Vector 1 is accelerating mass migration, the flow.
And Vector 2 is simultaneously building the architecture for control, the census and the management.
That dual function drives the ultimate strategic goal.
Yes, the sources are clear on this. The accelerated flow, the chaos, the security failures, they aren't accidents. They serve as the justification for replacing the erased physical border with a new, permanent digital border.
The end game. A global system of biometric identity management that replaces national sovereignty.
And this infrastructure isn't theoretical, it's already being deployed. In the Darien Gap, we're seeing UNHCR's PRIME system, that's Population Registration and Identity Management Ecosystem.
And alongside it,
the U.S.-backed BITE-TMAPI, the Biometric Identification Transnational Migration Alert Program.
So they're actively collecting and standardizing the digital identity for millions of people, creating the architecture for the new border before the old one is even gone.
The key takeaway is this. The modern migration process, often seen as organic chaos, is a managed, optimized, and financially insulated logistical pipeline. It's a system performing exactly as it was designed to.
So the core synthesis for you, the listener, is clear. This isn't one rogue group. It's an integrated governance structure. The corporate boards of Microsoft, Wells Fargo, PayPal, Adobe, they're deeply interlocked with policymakers at the CFR and Aspen and advocacy groups like HIAS and FWD.US.
Understanding the names, the interlocks, this governance network, That is the key to recognizing that the crisis you're watching is being justified and financially optimized for throughput by the very same entities building the architecture for the new digital world.
And if the physical border has been reduced to just a logistical bottleneck in an optimization model, what price are citizens paying for that efficiency? And how will this new infrastructure of digital identity, how will it change the definition of citizenship itself for everyone, no matter which side of that border you stand on? I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you for diving deep with us. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So for the last few segments, we've really been in the weeds on logistics, right? Mapping out these huge global networks.
Exactly, the operational mechanics.
But now we are shifting focus completely. This is part 4, and we're moving from the how to the who, the architecture of command.
That's right. Today is about what the source calls Indictment 2.
And what's the mission for this indictment?
Our mission is to expose the command and control nexus. And to do that, we're focusing on a single entity, the Microsoft Board of Directors.
So that's the shield.
That's the shield. And from there, we map out the Hydra heads, the connections that link this high-level corporate board to finance, to policy, and even to cultural institutions.
Okay, sounds technical. And appropriately, the sources start us off with a puzzle, a kind of deliberate deception.
Yes, right out of the gate. The analysis calls it HGW Method 4.
Can you just quickly break that down for us? What does that mean in this context?
It's a form of, let's call it strategic confusion. You use complexity, you use data overload to create a smokescreen.
Burying the real connections under a lot of noise.
Exactly. And it happened right away when we were looking for a link between Microsoft and a really key NGO in the migration space.
Right. We were looking at HIS.
Precisely. And the whole thing hinged on 2 different people with the same last name, Rodriguez.
The initial intel seemed to point to Leon Rodriguez. He's the former director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS.
And he's also a board member and secretary-treasurer of HIS. So if he were on the Microsoft board, that would be
the smoking gun.
Yeah.
Tech, government policy, NGO, all in one person.
And that's exactly where the deception was, that direct connection. It's just not accurate. The source labels it pseudo as a lie.
So who is the Rodriguez on the Microsoft board?
It's Carlos A. Rodriguez. A totally different person. He's the former CEO of ADP, Automatic Data Processing. He is on the board on the Audit and Compensation Committees.
Though he is stepping down next year, I believe.
He is. But the key here isn't just the correction. It's what this confusion reveals about the system's design.
Okay, so what's the real takeaway? The gnosis from this?
The big insight is that the hand is not one individual. The system is set up specifically to avoid that kind of single obvious link between, say, Microsoft and HIAS.
So the tech hand and the NGO hand are kept separate.
Physically separate, yes. But they're executing the same mission. It's a structure designed to prevent a single point of failure or any clear legal liability. It's about the system, not the person.
That makes a lot of sense. Distribute the influence so you can't target one person.
Exactly.
All right, so let's pivot from that misdirection to the verified, confirmed interlocks. And we start with a really big one, Charles W. Scharf.
This is where we start drawing the actual map. And Scharf is probably one of the most significant links. He fuses big tech directly with, too big to fail finance.
So let's break down his roles. He sits on a Microsoft board.
He does, on the compensation and, crucially, the governance and nominating committees.
And at the same time,
he is the chairman and chief executive officer of Wells Fargo and Company.
Wow. So the guy helping to choose who governs Microsoft is also running one of the biggest banks in the United States.
When you have that kind of dual role, the strategic conversations must be incredible. You're not just talking about software or loans. You're talking about the integrated future of digital and financial infrastructure.
I mean, some listeners might say, well, he's just a really qualified CEO. Is there anything in the source material that suggests this is more than just an advisory role?
That's the critical question, and the analysis suggests that the sheer number of these connections makes them operational, not accidental. His spot on the governance committee, that's strategic. It's a mechanism for cross-pollination.
Okay, and there's another layer to his influence, right? A cultural one.
Yes. This is interesting. He also sits on the corporate fund board of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
The Kennedy Center.
It's not just a donation. It confirms that the people governing our tech and finance are also stewards of our major cultural institutions. The influence extends way beyond the boardroom.
Okay, so from that tech bank interlock, let's move to more of a tech advocacy nexus. And that brings us to Reid Hoffman.
Right. If Scharf represents the systemic banking architecture, Hoffman is more about the policy enforcement layer.
He's on the Microsoft board as well.
He is. And his committee is key, the Environmental, Social, and Public Policy Committee. He's right at that intersection of tech and social policy.
And his own history is what makes that so significant.
Yeah.
The sources point to his role in building tools for financial neutralization.
He was a founding board member and an executive VP of PayPal.
Which this analysis explicitly calls a debanking tool.
And, that's a loaded term, but it comes from PayPal's documented use in cutting off financial access for certain groups or people.
And you have to pair that history with his other major project, FWD.US.
The pro-immigration lobbying group he co-founded, very influential.
So let's just synthesize that for a second. On the Microsoft board, you have a director who helped build a system for financial control.
Right.
And who also funds a major lobbying effort on migration policy. It's the convergence of those two missions right there at the top of Microsoft.
Exactly. And the network doesn't stop. He's also a member of the Aspen Institute and has connections to Stanford AI.
So the advocacy is backed by think tanks and academic research.
It ensures the whole operation is intellectually reinforced.
Okay, that's a really clear map of tech, finance, and advocacy. Which brings us to our final person for this deep dive, Penny Pritzker.
And if Hoffman is about advocacy, Pritzker is about the direct fusion of corporate tech with the U.S. political and global policy establishment.
Her role at Microsoft.
She's a director, but more importantly, she is the chair of that same Environmental, Social, and Public Policy Committee. So she's the one leading that charge.
And her background is just incredible. She was the 38th U.S. Secretary of Commerce.
Under the Obama administration, that's not just a title. That's deep executive-level knowledge of federal regulation, trade, data, everything.
So what about her current connections?
Well, her current board memberships read like a who's who of the policy world. She's on the board of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR.
The premier foreign policy think tank.
Absolutely. She's also advisory board chairman of the Aspen Institute. And this is interesting. She's a trustee of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
Wait a minute. That's the second time the Kennedy Center has come up.
Sure.
Scharf is on their board, too.
It is. A second direct interlock from the Microsoft board to that same cultural institution. It shows you that this isn't a side project. It's a core component of the influence structure.
So the person chairing Microsoft's Public Policy Committee is also deeply embedded in U.S. government, foreign policy, and high culture.
The connection suggests the goal isn't just to influence policy from the outside. It's about being the policy from the inside.
Okay, let's bring it all together. What is the final synthesis here?
When you map it all out, the investigation confirms that the Microsoft board really does act as a central command and control nexus. You can see at least 5 confirmed vectors of influence.
So we have the tech bank Interlock with Scharf and Wells Fargo.
Right. Then you have the tech to banking and tech lobby layer with Hoffman through PayPal and FWD.US.
Then tech policy with Pritzker through her time at Commerce and her role at the CFR.
And finally, that culture vector with both Scharf and Pritzker connecting directly to the Kennedy Center.
It's powerful because it's not about one leader. It's systemic. The source calls the whole structure the Hydra for a reason. It's this integrated system with all these different heads.
It's governance by convergence. It suggests they're doing much more than just selling software. They seem to be synthesizing the future of finance, policy, and even culture from one central corporate hub.
And that really leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. If major corporations are deliberately building boards to interlock with finance, policy, and culture, is the goal just to influence those sectors? Or, as this analysis suggests, is it to absorb their functions entirely? And what kind of governance can possibly regulate a system where public policy and the private sector are overseen by the very same group of people?
Welcome back. We've spent months now tracking the money, the tech, the whole strategy. Our source material calls 8th generation warfare.
Yeah.
But today, we've reached what the analysis is calling the final aletheia.
The final truth reveal.
Exactly. It's the wake-up call.
It is. If all the previous deep dives were, building the case piece by piece, this is the closing argument.
So our mission today is to dig into this central claim that the Microsoft Board of Directors is basically acting as a central command and control nexus for this entire campaign.
That's the core of it. And we should probably just quickly define our terms again for anyone just jumping in.
Good idea. So when we say 8th generation warfare or 8GW, We're not talking about a battlefield with soldiers.
Not at all. It's a strategy that's designed to gain administrative control over a country's core systems. We're talking finance, government, technology.
Steering it from the inside.
Steering it from the inside without ever firing a shot. And the key mechanism is something the sources call systemic co-option.
Okay, so this systemic co-option is what exactly?
Right. It's when the leadership of these huge private transnational companies become fused, really integrated into the operational infrastructure of the state itself.
Which brings us to the big finding of this whole analysis.
The big one.
That the Microsoft board isn't just a group of successful executives. The claim is that it's been deliberately structured to do exactly that, to facilitate this co-option.
Right. It's the final piece of the puzzle. The evidence points to these direct executive-level interlocks into the highest levels of U.S. banking, federal policy, and these advocacy groups.
All connected to two main vectors.
Two huge strategic vectors, mass migration and domestic disarmament.
So let's unpack these formal interlocks. The claim is the Microsoft board is the central node, right? The place where all these lines converge.
It is, and it suggests a very deliberate strategy. We have to start with the tech bank connection.
Charles W. Scharf.
Charles W. Scharf. He's an independent director on the Microsoft board, and at the same time, he is the chairman and chief executive officer of Wells Fargo.
And Wells Fargo is, without question, a too-big-to-fail bank. That's a direct, high-level link. A dominant tech company and a systemically critical bank.
It's a massive link. But what's really interesting here is how his position is used. It's not just a simple, we're all on the same team kind of thing.
The sources called it a policy of calculated ambiguity.
Yes, and this is key to understanding how 8GW operates with flexibility. So, for example, Wells Fargo will fund the research. They'll satisfy the ESG mandates, keep that side happy.
They fund the conversation.
They fund the conversation. But Scharf and the bank have also pushed back, pretty hard actually, against being used as an enforcement arm for social policy.
So they protect their, quote, ordinary business.
Exactly. They offer the political carrot to the activists, but they refuse to use the financial stick on their own customers. It's a strategy that keeps the bank running smoothly while checking the necessary political boxes.
No, couldn't that just be smart corporate networking? Is this really evidence of something more coordinated?
By itself, maybe. But when you layer it with the other interlocks, the pattern becomes, very compelling.
Which brings us to the next individual.
It does. Penny Pritzker, the tech policy connection.
So Ms. Pritzker is a current Microsoft board director, but she's not just a business person. She was the former U.S. Secretary of Commerce.
A very powerful position. She provides that direct link between the Microsoft board and the U.S. policy establishment, but it goes beyond just Washington, D.C.
Right. The analysis confirmed her affiliations with these global policy groups.
The Aspen Institute, where she's an advisory board chair, and crucially, she's a board member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR.
So she's not just a retired official. She is actively shaping the global conversation that tech companies like Microsoft have to operate in.
And inside Microsoft. She chairs the Environmental, Social, and Public Policy Committee. She literally governs how Microsoft itself engages with all of this.
Okay, we need to pause here for a second and address something the sources called the Rodriguez contradiction, because this was a confusing point.
It's a perfect example of 8GW Method 4 in action. That's the psychological manipulation through disinformation and, near-miss confusion.
So the initial analysis found a link?
The initial analysis flagged that a former USCIS director, the head of federal immigration, a man named Leon Rodriguez, was interlocked with the Microsoft board.
Wow. That would be the smoking gun right there.
The ultimate smoking gun. The guy who ran immigration policy sitting on the board of the tech company that profits from immigration data.
But that turned out to be a near miss.
A very, very compelling near miss. After more digging, it was resolved. The Microsoft board member is actually Carlos A. Rodriguez, the former CEO of ADP.
Ah, I see.
But, and this is the key part, Leon Rodriguez, the former USCIS director, does sit on the board of HIS.
One of the biggest NGOs that facilitates mass migration.
One of the very biggest.
So the individual connection was maybe a false flag, but the systemic connection is even more powerful.
Exactly. The resolved truth here is that the Hydra's hand isn't one person. It's the system itself. You have the tech, Microsoft, and the NGO, HIAS, and there are two separate hands.
Executing one mission.
Executing one mission. The coordination isn't on a single board seat. It happens because they share the same systemic goals. The goal is co-option.
That makes the structure itself the weapon. So let's pivot to how this structure drives those two vectors we mentioned. First, the weaponization of mass migration, what the sources call invasion.
Right. And for this, we go back to the Microsoft board and we look at Reid Hoffman.
Okay, Reid Hoffman.
He's a Microsoft board director. He is also the co-founder of the pro-immigration lobbying group, FWD.US.
So there's a political advocacy link right at the top, pushing for more migration.
But his role is twofold. This is where it gets really incredible. He also connects the Microsoft board directly to the debanking mission.
How so?
The analysis confirmed he was an executive vice president and a founding board member of PayPal, the hand that built the tool. PayPal has been confirmed to be the tool used for deplatforming groups like Patriot Prayer. So Hoffman's presence links the Microsoft board to both the lobby pushing for migration and the tool used for economic neutralization of political opponents.
Wait, so the same executive is lobbying for more migration and was foundational in building the financial tool used to deplatform people who often criticize those very policies.
That is the stunning symmetry of it. It's a completely integrated campaign.
And Microsoft itself profits from this.
Oh, absolutely. The source material is clear on this. Microsoft profits directly from the crisis at the border. It holds mission-critical Azure cloud contracts with both DHS and IC.
For what?
Data processing, facial recognition. They provide the digital infrastructure for the very border apparatus.
The same apparatus.
That the NGO network, which their own execs are funding, is, pushing to the breaking point.
Okay, let's turn to the second vector, funding the disarmament agenda.
Or the domestic architecture of constraint.
This is where the money trail becomes undeniable.
It really does. The analysis maps a direct financial link from Microsoft-linked private wealth, specifically the Ballmer Group.
Steve Ballmer, the former Microsoft CEO.
That's the one. His philanthropic arm, the Ballmer Group, was the single largest disclosed cash contributor to the campaign to pass Oregon's Measure 114.
And Measure 114 is the one that mandates a permit-to-purchase system.
And a statewide gun and owner registry. So you have the direct financial link. Microsoft's linked wealth funds the political machine for disarmament.
While the corporate entity provides the tech infrastructure to make it happen.
Precisely. Microsoft's Azure Government Cloud is the designated platform to host the Measure 114 registry itself.
So the co-option is complete, the money funds the policy, and the corporation builds the digital cage.
The architecture of constraint. It's a framework of digital controls designed to limit free action based on these new state-mandated registries.
And the power isn't just in these formal board seats, it's also the informal influence, right? What the sources call soft influence.
Elite capture, yeah. 8GW Method 5, cultural subversion.
This is that golf course nexus idea.
It is. We confirmed an informal interlock between two of the most powerful people we've talked about, Charles Scharf, the Wells Fargo CEO, and Penny Pritzker, the policy expert.
They don't just share a boardroom at Microsoft.
No. They both sit on the corporate fund board or are trustees of the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts.
A cultural citadel.
It reinforces the whole thing, the convergence of finance, policy, and technology happening outside of any public view. The network isn't just organizational, it's social. It ensures everyone is aligned.
So let's just summarize this. The final aletheia, the final truth, is that the evidence shows the Microsoft board interlocks with the banks through Scharf, with global policy through Pritzker, the CFR, Aspen, with the debanking tool through Hoffman and PayPal, and with the invasion lobby through Hoffman and FWD.US.
And they profit from the crisis through DHS and IC contracts, while their linked wealth funds the domestic disarmament agenda.
Which brings us to the final systemic takeaway.
That this concentrated network represents systemic co-option. The leadership of a single tech entity, Microsoft, has deep, personal, executive-level access to the highest levers of American banking, immigration policy, and political advocacy.
And that access is what enables the entire AGW campaign.
That's the conclusion of the analysis.
The complexity of it all. The formal links, the informal connections, the, deliberate use of confusing information. It really is the wake-up call the sources talk about. This is why they call the truth the Hydra.
You don't fight one person. You have to understand the entire interconnected structure.
And that structure, as the analysis shows, seems to be actively managing the border crisis. A controlled flow.
To justify the need for a global digital identity system. We know Microsoft and Google are fusing assets built by intelligence units like Israel's Unit 8200.
Specialized in deep surveillance.
And data processing. So if the physical border, a nation's sovereign barrier, is being strategically dismantled to justify replacing it with a digital one.
And the companies building that digital system are fused with the intelligence units that build the surveillance tech.
It leaves you with a final and I think critical question to consider. What happens to national identity and to your own freedom when a state's sovereign barrier is replaced by a digital identity system controlled not by the state,
but by a non-sovereign transnational corporate network?
Exactly.
Knowledge is power. Knowing the players is the first step. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
This is where we take a whole range of complex, often disconnected sources and, well, we try to synthesize them into a single clear picture for you. And our mission today is very, very specific. We're analyzing what our source material calls the two-vector mission, or the AGOJ. The basic idea is a synchronized pincer movement. So you have these two huge, seemingly unrelated operations running in parallel.
But they're not unrelated, and that's the key. Our sources argue they're managed by the same central nexus of wealth and influence.
So it's not a coincidence, it's a design.
Exactly. That's the entire framework. So you have vector one, which is the external pressure. The sources call it an invasion that moves through a very highly managed pipeline.
Okay.
And then you have vector two, that's the internal preparation, the building of a domestic architecture of constraint, think disarmament policies.
So one jaw of the pincer is external, the other is internal.
Precisely. And our whole focus today is showing you how one specific interconnected corporate and philanthropic nexus is basically governing both jaws of that pincer at the same time.
All right, so let's unpack that. I think we should start with vector one, the migration pipeline.
Makes sense.
The sources describe it as this 5-stage system. It's all designed to, accelerate human movement from the global south.
And funnel it directly into U.S. sanctuary jurisdictions. And Oregon is presented as a prime example of that final destination.
So to really get it, we need to look at the engine, right? Where does this whole flow even begin? And, more importantly, how is it funded?
Okay, so the engine, operationally speaking, is located pretty firmly in Silicon Valley, and what the sources call the Unit 8200 Nexus.
Unit 8200 being Israel's elite intelligence unit.
Right, and its importance here is that it functions as a de facto talent incubator for global technology. Its veterans, they go on to found or lead some of the most important tech and cybersecurity firms in the world.
Can you give us some concrete examples of those links? Because that feels like the foundation for this whole argument.
For sure. Palo Alto Networks, a huge name in cybersecurity, was founded by a Unit 8200 alumnus near Zook.
Oh.
And, maybe even more to the point, the cloud security firm Wiz was founded entirely by 8200 veterans. And you can see this nexus getting tighter, through strategic moves like Google's planned acquisition of Wiz.
Which the sources describe as what? The biggest transfer of Israeli intelligence into big tech ever.
Something like that, yeah. The largest transfer of Israeli intelligence operatives into big tech in history. That's the quote.
So that's the source of the tech, the methodology. What about the money? How does the cash actually flow to the groups that are managing migrants on the ground?
It's a dual-track system. The sources lay it out pretty clearly. Track one uses basically untraceable charitable accounts. They're called DAFs, or donor-advised funds.
And organizations like the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, they manage these.
They do. They provide these non-attributable grants. For instance, SVCF gave $1.7 million to the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. So huge amounts of cash can move without anyone knowing the original donor.
And the second track is more direct, right? The corporate support. That's where you link the tech world to the NGOs.
Exactly. And that gets to the why. Why would a cybersecurity firm fund immigration aid?
Yeah.
The sources show these really visible links. For example, Palo Alto Networks is a documented corporate supporter of HIS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society.
Okay.
And Google.org gave $1 million to something called Justicial Lab AI.
Yeah.
The stated purpose was to accelerate access to justice for immigrants.
So the implication is that this funding isn't just charity. It's scaling up the pipeline itself, making it more efficient.
It turns a humanitarian effort into a massive, organized, logistical operation. That's the argument.
Which brings us to the mechanics of the flow itself. This is where it gets kind of wild. The PSYOP push and the SOMA pull. How are people being, digitally pushed and physically pulled at the same time?
So the PSYOP push is all about digital psychological operations, what the sources call 8th-generation warfare. You have anonymous botnets, synthetic profile.
The AI-generated stuff.
AI-generated success stories, yeah. They get amplified on TikTok, on WhatsApp, and these stories, a lot of them apparently from unverified Chinese accounts, they promise the American dream. They promise free legal aid.
And they even provide tips on how to use apps, like CBP-1, to guide the journey.
Exactly. So that's the digital push, a very targeted campaign. And it runs in parallel with the physical SOMA poll.
Which is where the NGOs come in.
Correct. The SOMA poll is the physical help from groups like HIAS and the Jesuit Refugee Service. They're on the ground at key staging points, especially around the Darien Gap.
And they're giving out aid, fact sheets, rights manuals.
All of it. The idea is to neutralize the risk, to make the journey seem less dangerous. The sources actually quote their goal as helping people save some money so that they can continue their journey north. It's a massive pull factor.
And that leads us to the core logistics. This isn't chaos, is it? The sources are very clear that this is a controlled flow.
It is, explicitly. The sources state this is a U.S.-backed policy under DHS and the State Department. It's designed not to stop the movement,
But to speed it up.
but to expand the capacity and speed of movement through those bottlenecks like the Darien Gap.
Yeah.
It's about optimizing throughput, like a server.
And when you prioritize speed over security, there are consequences. The sources talk about vetting failures.
Huge consequences. They point to a DHS Inspector General report that confirmed a case, a pretty catastrophic one. Border Patrol accidentally freed a Colombian national who was definitely on the terror watch list.
And the reason given.
The agents were, and this is a quote, overwhelmed by the increased flow of migrants. They had to sacrifice real vetting just for processing speed. It shows you the trade-off.
So that brings us to the final stage of Vector 1, the anchoring. The pipeline ends in places like Oregon, a sanctuary state. How does this same network make sure people stay there and that federal enforcement is, well, blocked?
It's the same network of NGOs again. HIAS, Catholic Charities of Oregon, SOR. They're the designated refugee resettlement agencies there.
And their main job is something called removal defense.
Right. Which is, to put it simply, the legal machinery designed specifically to block federal deportation attempts.
And the sources are pretty explicit about the risk here.
Oh, absolutely. SORA's own official documents, their list of populations served, it explicitly includes individuals with criminal histories and individuals who are not in legal immigration status.
So the mission is stated pretty clearly. It's to provide legal protection against federal law, even for high-risk individuals.
It completes the pipeline.
Okay, so that's the external attack. Vector 1 delivers a strategic crisis to a state like Oregon. Now, how does Vector 2 make sure that state is, for lack of a better word, disarmed before the crisis even arrives? This is the other jaw of the pincer, the architecture of constraint.
And Vector 2 is all about creating those domestic policy constraints. Oregon's Measure 114 is the perfect case study here. The network's fingerprints are just all over it.
So let's look at that architecture, the political side and the money side behind M114.
The main political architect here, the group writing the model legislation that M114 is based on, is Everytown for Gun Safety.
That's Michael Bloomberg's network.
That's the one. They provide the template.
And the money to get it passed.
Yeah.
You mentioned that corporate nexus overlap.
And that ties right back to the tech world. The Ballmer Group, which is tied to all that Microsoft wealth, was the single largest disclosed cash contributor to the campaign to pass Measure 114.
So now we get to the fusion. You have a state actor, the Oregon State Police, that's basically co-opted. They're forced into being the digital gatekeeper for the state's own residents.
Exactly right. The OSP is now tasked with building and managing a centralized gun and owner registry. That's a huge level of state control.
And the tech infrastructure for that registry, don't tell me.
Microsoft's Azure Government Cloud is the designated platform for hosting it.
Wow. So Microsoft Wealth funds the measure, and then Microsoft's infrastructure is used to sell the state the cloud service it needs to enforce the measure.
They profit from creating the constraint. That financial loop is central to the entire argument in the sources. And what's more, the measure immediately created this huge internal conflict, which is a key outcome.
You mean the division between state police and local law enforcement?
Right, the rural sheriffs.
Like Lynn County Sheriff Michelle Duncan.
Exactly. Sheriffs, like her publicly vowed non-enforcement, they called it an unconstitutional, unfunded mandate. And the result is this internal split, this chaos within the state's own enforcement system. That itself is a tactic.
So let's synthesize this. When you put the two vectors together, what do you have? You have mass migration being accelerated on one hand and domestic constraints being imposed on the other. Both focused on Oregon, both traced back to the same corporate and philanthropic sources.
The core truth, the aletheia, as the sources call it when you synthesize all the documents, is this. Private, ideologically motivated wealth, Ballmer, funds a political outcome, M114, that is executed by a state agency, OSP, on the technical infrastructure, Microsoft, of the same corporate nexus.
So it's not just that these people know each other. It's that decisions about big tech infrastructure are being made by people who are also governing global finance and policy at the same time.
It's about the interlocks. Let's look at the Microsoft Board of Directors as the central command and control nexus.
Let's do it.
Okay, take the tech bank link. Charles W. Scharf. He's a director on the Microsoft board. He is also the chairman and CEO of Wells Fargo.
So a top decision maker at a critical bank is inside the governance of a critical tech provider.
Directly. Then there's the tech policy link with someone like Reid Hoffman.
Also on the Microsoft board.
Also on the board. And he provides a direct link to both vectors. He co-founded FWD.US, which is a major pro-immigration lobbying group.
Pushing for Vector 1.
And he was a founding board member of PayPal, which the sources identify as a primary debanking tool used against domestic dissidents. That's Vector 2.
And then Penny Pritzker connects the board to the global policy world.
Penny Pritzker, yep. Another Microsoft board director, former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. She links the board to places like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Aspen Institute. You see a coordinated network across finance, policy, culture.
So the system is resilient. It's not about one person. It's about different, coordinated hands, tech, NGO, finance, all working on a single mission.
And that gets us to the final, really critical so what for you, the listener. The purpose of accelerating mass migration isn't just to erase borders.
It's to replace them.
It's to use the chaos and the crisis that results as the justification to replace physical barriers with a totally new layer of digital control.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you today. If that crisis is the justification, then the solution being rolled out is a new global digital identity infrastructure. We're seeing programs like the UNHCR's Primes or the US-backed Bitmap. They're actively creating these global interoperable digital IDs for migrants in the exact same places we just discussed.
Yeah.
So the ultimate implication is that sovereignty itself is being shifted away from physical geography, which is being made obsolete, to a new layer of algorithmic control, a system that is built, overseen, and deployed by the very same corporate state nexus that orchestrated the crisis in the first place. That is a powerful idea to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.